Good day, everybody. Welcome to our August Dalim Tips and Tricks webinar. Today we're going to focus kind of a little bit deep dive into ES connector plugin from Dalim. I kind of covered this a while back, mixed up with the React interface, but kind of just went over some basic stuff. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into some of the workflow that we can do behind it. Reminder, go to webinar. Up top center, I believe now, there's a zoom button if you need to zoom in more or help you view things a little bit better. I work from kind of a large screen, so I'm not sure how well it's going to show up. Wanted to bring up a note to everybody. We are going to be playing with maybe moving this to Teams and getting off the go-to stuff, since we use about, I think, 3 or 4 different sharing applications. We're trying to centralize and use Teams a little bit more, but I haven't played with it for webinars, so we're going to go ahead and test that out before we do. So again, just going to kind of go over a basic overview of the plugin, which will be completely a bit of a recap, maybe cover a couple of things I didn't before, and then get into kind of InDesign page workflows with InDesign server in the mix, how to set up ES workflows to do different things, including doing variables for the workflow. First off, to install the plugin, you can just go now to Marketplaces. You don't no longer need to bother us and have us email you the latest version. It's completely updated all the time on the Marketplace from Adobe. Just go do a search on the plugins for Dalim, and you'll see the plugin and can install it and manage it from there. Once it's installed, what you'll get is a plugin like this. You'll find it under the Windows menu, extensions, and it'll be the one that's all in caps, since it's actually named the same as the one from Silicon Publishing. On my desktop, if you're looking, this Dalim pull down, that's specific to Silicon Publishing's plugin. So if you've only installed the Dalim ES connector plugin, you'll only see the one setting here that's actually checked and not the top one. Plug in here, you just basically put in your server URL. So that's the base URL to your server. If you need 8080 to connect to it or a specific port, you need to put that in after. But basically it's this or HTTPS. And I'm going to be logging straight in, but if you need to give credentials, it'll come up and ask for the credentials. I'll show that in a minute anyway. Also, if you connect to multiple ES servers for any reason, you'll have them here, all the different repositories that you actually connect to. When you connect, you come into the plugin itself, and unfortunately, I can't blow this up, so it's the size it is. There's no changing sizes of icons or anything like that. It's basically the one view. You come up to the browser view as default, and this is where you browse exactly what you see on your ES systems. You have your customers area, where you see the customers you have available to yourself, file systems area, where you can see the file systems you have available as well. Also, it shows up is going to be your private collections or collections that you have set up. Anything in there, you can also go through as well. The rest of this interface, the rest of this screen, basically at the bottom are specific actions you can do once we start playing with documents, and some information on the asset you have selected here. I'll show that as we kind of go through everything. One to bring a caveat, you do have a search button in here. On the latest patches, so the newer patches that helped us install Service Pack 1, there is a bug where the search function is not working. So just if you're playing with this, if you want to test it out, because it is free, you can download it from the Adobe store. If you have newer patches, it won't work. Beginning of September, they're going to have the patch set to fix this. Now, if you're working on all the patches before that, pretty much the patches most customers are kind of still running and stuff, or an ES 5.5, it works fine. It'll do a search through your repository of all the files you have available to your logged in user. And you'll see that basically mimics if I log in here as my webinar user. And again, he only sees the webinar customer and the file system, the S3, and Fred's Dropbox. The second tab over, it's specific to the assets that are placed on a page. So it's the assets you have that are actually being used. And we'll show that as we start playing with the assets and what control we have over them. Third is your settings. So any specific preferences you have come here. I gotta say, autosave on upload has been working fine. So I know even with the Silicon Publishing plugin and the earlier versions of this plugin, it pretty much you had to save before you hit upload, or you'd get the previous saved version of your file. This now, as long as you've named the file, and I'll show that already, it'll save any updates right before it does the upload. That's specific to an InDesign page itself. The auto close document after check-in, I haven't really seen that working. I'm not sure, but I'll play with that and I'll mention that and show it. It doesn't really close your document, but not a big feature anyway. The autosave is much more important because if you kind of forget to hit save before you upload and you don't have that on, all of a sudden you wind up without the changes you made and might be confused. Use high resolution images, basically toggle on and off, and that's specific to how you want to work. I'll kind of go through working both ways and what that actually means to you. The PDF export preset, this will pop up anyway, but you can kind of set what your default is for what the preset's going to come up with when you export a PDF from the plugin. Repository shows which repository you're actually connected to, let you change the repository if you want. Account shows the user you're logged in as. And this is kind of important if you actually switch users, because since the plugin remembers what user you come in as, it doesn't ask you to re-authenticate because it saves all that information. If you need to log in as a different user, you actually use that button there. It'll come back in and it'll ask you to log back in with whatever credentials you want. Since I switch users a lot, that was kind of important to find. Cache tells it where you want to stash the cache folders. So when you're working with the plugin, if you check out a file from your ES, or if you're placing images from ES into InDesign, it has to download them. ES only works with storing files local. So it will download them to a temporary directory. You'll notice right now mine has 318 megs in it because I was playing before the demo, and you'll see basically those show up in these temporary directories like this. So if I want to clear that, if I want to clear that out, I can hit the trash can, clear that out, and the files are now gone. So directory to watch out for if you're working a lot from the plugin and want to clean that out every now and then. And you can change that obviously if you have a SSD drive or something attached to your system and you'd rather put it on an external drive, you can do that there by just changing that path. And then you also obviously the version of the plugin and specific information like that. Under the hamburger menu up here, you have reload, which is kind of just a refresh of where you're at. If the plugin gets hung, go home, we'll bring you back to the login menu, let you log back in. And then obviously you can go to Dalim's web page or support pages through here. So those are the basics on that. We'll pull up Photoshop probably a little bit later, but basically Photoshop is much simpler than the InDesign one, since you're basically just checking files out and checking them back in. So the old school method of, before we get into a little bit deeper dive, if you're working with a new file, so go in here, make a new document. And, whatever, you're going to design a page and maybe place some images on it. design your page, do whatever you're doing, typical stuff. As mentioned, so I need to make sure from a navigation standpoint that you're in the folder you want to work with. So there's no way for it to know you want to go into a specific folder, especially if you have other subfolders, things like that. You always need to upload it where you need to go. You also can't choose the workflow or anything. It's strictly going to work if it hits this project or this folder inside of a project in ES. It is going to take that workflow and run the file or use the naming convention to do that. If I try to upload this on this, a couple of things are going to happen. One, it's going to tell me that some of the assets that I've placed are local and they're not in the ES repository. So I can cancel that if I want to say, oh, I really need these images in ES. I can go ahead and hit this button, and I'm hoping, yeah, there you go. It says upload all local links. So if I do that, and I shouldn't have done that there actually, but I'll go ahead and do it. And it's going to go ahead and upload those. The reason I shouldn't have done it there is that's actually a different workflow than I want to process. It's not just a generic preview workflow. It'll go ahead and it will upload these images in there. And on my system, it's been taking a little while, but they should go in there. So there's a JPEG. I'm dealing with decent sized files, and that's just to kind of show that if you're working from this high-res files, it can be a little bit cumbersome. But I shouldn't say cumbersome, just a little bit sluggish, and it does take the user some time to do things. So there's my images, and they've gone in there, and they're going to fail in the workflow. But come in here, and now I can upload my page. Again, since I haven't saved this page, it's going to ask me to save it and go ahead and upload that page. From here, there's my page. It's an InDesign file, and it's uploaded in here. If I make a change now, so I want to recrop that or move that one down here, whatever it is, and I re-upload. This is one thing I've noticed in the plugin every now and then, especially after you've done an upload, you'll get this not connected to repository. Basically just refresh and rework. You notice that time it did not ask me to save. It should have auto-saved that change. And you'll notice my second revision, that file is in here. Obviously for InDesign pages, what ES uses is going to be the preview that is associated with the InDesign page. So it's not rendering an InDesign page, it's just InDesign will put a preview with it depending on your preferences, and you can change the size or that if I remember where that is. Where is it? Meant to check that before and forgot. Let's just go here. File handling. And there is your setting. You can do it all pages. You can do it on just the first page or first 2 pages. And I always have mine set to extra large because I do use it with ES at times. If you notice you don't have a preview, you can refresh. It'll give you the latest preview as well. So that's working with that. You'll notice in my tab, again, it's showing what images are linked. It shows it's actually the high definition version that's linked. By double clicking, you can download the preview of it. So if you just want to work with low res, you can do that. It'll download that and work with that. Or go back to high res. You'll notice on the links panel, because I actually downloaded that one, it's linked to the CMIS directory here, but my other image I haven't set to download is actually here. Yeah, InDesign always needs to be linked to a file that is available locally to show it here in links. I'll show later that doesn't necessarily matter for working with ES. But if you're working with strictly just a plugin, you don't have an InDesign server or anything like that, and you now need to come in here and maybe this is going through approvals, whatever, you hit your upload button, your create PDF button. It'll come up, ask you what the presets are you want to use, or what preset you use is. Change any other settings you want, export, and it'll export it locally, create the PDF in the CMIS directory, and export it back out to ES. It does not currently have any kind of upload progress button or anything like that. What you'll notice is while it's actually doing the actual upload, when it's done, it comes up with this. While it's doing it, you'll notice all of these actions are actually grayed out. When they're in this state, your action's done, and if I refresh, my PDF is there and processed. So that's kind of the old school. We kind of went through this when I originally showed the plugin a few months back. But what we want to do is actually discuss, what else can we do from there? Sometimes we've gotten a lot from customers, especially when the pandemic started, and all their users had to start working from home. Even using things like the plugin in the mode I just showed could be sluggish if you deal with really large files, things like that. What a lot of users found out, and I think I mentioned this in webinars before, is, although a lot of us have, maybe gigabit or pretty decent download speeds, sometimes the upload speeds on those networks, especially when everyone was working from home on shared networks, shared ISPs in neighborhoods, the upload speeds were dreadful. And if you're making a PDF like that, or especially a multi-page PDF maybe with a bunch of images, you could wind up with 100 meg, 150 meg PDF that takes the user some time to upload. So alternatives, we can do an InDesign page workflow and tie ES into an InDesign server and let the InDesign server on the network itself handle making all the PDFs. That way you have that one server to keep up. You have your presets, everything on there. You don't have to distribute them to users, and you could allow the users to work that way and go through InDesign page approvals before you even make those PDFs and save that time. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit today and show. I promised a couple of customers I'd work on this for a while, and I finally was able to get around to it. So that's why I wanted to show it to everybody. So what's needed, first of all, is getting the plugin from Dalim and us. It's not a marketplace. The InDesign server plugin is not available through the Adobe Marketplace. You do have to get it from us or Dalim. You have to make sure the InDesign server itself, the server that InDesign server is running on, can reach the ES server on whichever port you publicly get to it. So 80, 80, 80, or 443. Obviously, that typically is going to work. You just sometimes, if you're doing Windows Server, especially firewall settings and stuff, you have to make sure it can get out to whichever port you need. From the ES server to InDesign, you need to make sure that whatever port you run InDesign server on, so I'm running it in my test, I just did 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Obviously, it can be whatever port you want that doesn't conflict with another application. You have to make sure the ES server can hit that port, because it is going to call it via the API and run it. So that is something you have to make sure. Obviously, if you're on the same network, not as big a deal, but in my scenario, and you'll see a little bit of sluggishness because of this, but in my scenario, I'm running my InDesign server in AWS. I'm running my ES servers, my old demo server, which runs in our data center in Shreveport. So that is networking I had to make sure was working between the two. Then you do have to have a common share. So in this case, we have an NFS share off of the server running InDesign server to the ES server and a mount point between those with proper access permissions, which I turned over to Jude because I got frustrated, between the InDesign server, which is going to be writing files to a directory and deleting files from that temporary directory, And the ES server, which is also the same, going to be writing files to a temporary directory and then deleting those as well when it's done with what it's doing. So those are the things that are needed to do that. Yep. So on the InDesign server side, there is basically all of the plugin features installed in a directory called Adobe OPI that goes in this case, since I'm on a Windows server and I installed InDesign Server 2020, it goes in Program Files, Adobe InDesign Server 2020 scripts. It's a whole directory that goes in there. Inside of there, there's a configuration file, config.js. You need to put some specific information in there for how it connects to your ES server and what your temporary directories are. So this just sets a temp directory for the Windows server itself, in this case, /temp. So that's just kind of its working directory where it's building stuff. The default output directory is just inside of temp. You set a default preset, so just in case there's a typo somewhere in the preset you're trying to send to it, it'll use, in this case, X1A2001, and then repository information. For those of you who played with previous versions of the plugin, or even I think Silicon Publishing had a similar format where you basically just give it the repository information, the base URL, username, password, and you can have as many servers in here as you want. For instance, like you saw, my plugin had a bunch of different servers. If I wanted all those servers, if I was going to play with InDesign Server with all of those, I would just repeat those and give it which one's the default. Then on the ES side itself, Dalim will provide an InDesign Python script, which goes in Symlinks var 60 scripts. So it's a script step. Those of you who play with script steps, you know they go in there and they show up inside of ES as a tool for your ES workflow. Some specific settings that you need to set in there. Local share path. So where is that mount from my Windows server at? So in this case, it was volumes and FS share. I have to tell the window what on the Windows side where that share is. So I did it at the root level of C. The IP address of the Windows server running InDesign server, that port that I'm calling, and then where the script exists. So obviously, depending on the version of InDesign server you're running, or Windows OS 10 versions of InDesign server, that path has to be specific. This is all information that ES uses to build the API call, because basically when you call an InDesign server, you're telling it, hey, I need you to run this specific file, which is going to be in the share location, using a specific script that exists inside of this location. So I'll show that. So hopefully this actually does okay. I was hoping it would follow my other screen. So this is just the InDesign server. So I'll kind of be referencing that when I'm doing stuff. You'll see here's my NFS share, and there's a jobs folder that gets created and not deleted, but in here builds, it's where ES will dump the InDesign page that it wants the InDesign server to work on, and this is the temp directory that InDesign will use running. Just to show you, so if I shut it down there, can launch it. This is where I set what port I want. So there's what I'm calling 12346, and just basically run an InDesign server on that specific port that'll start up. And fortunately, I didn't go into demo mode and crash that. So now if I come back here, and I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Go up here and I'll actually show, if I want to check a file out. So here's an InDesign document, and this might be a template. You go into a template directory where you have a bunch of templates you might be using for your publication or whatever. And I hit that button to check it out. It downloads it again to that CMIS directory. Doesn't have links. It thinks it has links, but it doesn't. then I can actually browse for images, whether I'm doing a search or if I go to a specific directory, and I can actually pull up specific files and place those from my ES server. If you go in, I can have a mix of PDFs, JPEGs, PSDs. I've kind of played with all those different image formats and didn't have a problem. Only problem I found is because of my connectivity issue, I did for a 200 meg Photoshop file, I did have it time out on me, which I'm sure I can play with timeout settings, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Oops. So if I have images saved, I can save this as, or could overwrite that other document, remembering to go out to top level. In this case, I don't want to overwrite my template, so I'm just going to come out here, and it doesn't matter where I save it. It's basically temporary. Come out here. Going to the links tab, you'll see I actually have a low-res version of all these placed. They're not downloaded. They're strictly just linked to ES itself, and that'll stay in there. I can download these if I want to work on them locally. If I click on any specific one, you'll see down here where it gives me information about it, gives me a size, gives me a location, the asset ID, just some basic information like that. And if I come back here now and I go ahead and upload my Dalim page, I'm sorry, my InDesign page, going back to my litho days and talking about Dalim pages. So you see it's successfully uploaded. If I go to my ES now, level, you see here, it's coming in here. What I did in this workflow is just stopped it. Just kind of do a basic approval. Again, this is an InDesign page. It's going to be low res, but I can make sure everything's placed. If I had text in it, check for typos, whatever. Go through my approval. If I can get there. You'll see as soon as I do that, you'll see it starting here. Here it went ahead and placed my InDesign page. And it's executing script. What it's doing is actually going out and downloading the specific images. So it's going to go and download each image. Again, these are decent size, but I haven't troubleshot the connectivity on these two. It seems to me a little bit sluggish on doing it. And that's what I was saying before about a 200 meg one actually timed out coming here, which it shouldn't. The network between these, AWS and my data center is pretty fast. So it could be something else going on there. I just prepping for webinar, I didn't have time to actually troubleshoot that. You'll see here as it's downloading these files, that's what it uses the temp directory for. It's actually go ahead and placing the downloaded files because InDesign server, just like InDesign, needs local access to those. And what the script does is it actually downloads them to the temporary directory and then is basically modifying the InDesign page to update the link to these new images. It should be finished in just a second. My biggest image, probably. There we go. So now it's updating that link and then should start creating the, oh, now I got 6 images. All right, well, while that's running, so it's gonna take a little while longer, I'll show you the basic workflow this is running in. So file came in, this is just my approval step here. This program link is something I'll show in a little bit. This is my script step that showed up. And then what the workflow requires, one, you need to do save working slot, and then a restore working slot at the end with a document step here. Because what's happening is you're running the file you're running an InDesign page, you're sending it off to InDesign server, you're getting back from there a PDF into the workflow. So this will actually create a new file from the PDF that came in, and then you're restoring the InDesign page that got sent at this point to complete the workflow. So those are required steps. Otherwise, what you're going to get here is a PDF is going to basically be in place, but it's going to in ES it's going to be called an IDD file. So it's going to be thinking it's an InDesign page. It's a PDF under the hood. So that's kind of an important part there of the workflow, and all. You know, the rest of your workflow can look however complex you want it to be as far as approvals, different things you're doing. I could have done something here for multi-page PDFs to split them. You know, whatever you need to do in the workflow, but those steps are necessary in that. This piece itself, the script step actually requires a couple of variables. Jobs is just saying what's that temporary directory I'm writing to. The variable job name is going to be in there, so it's going to basically just write jobs, job name, which in this case was webinar 1 when it had pulled up. And then here, basically you're calling a PDF preset. The default of this is a little bit different. Typically, like you would call PDF X1A in here or something like that. I'm just doing something here so I can dynamically change it. And I'll discuss that in a little bit. I keep saying that today. So you notice that file completed as it went through. Here is my PDF. I could open it in there, but I'm going to download it. If you notice, it's 3.6 megs. I'm not even sure what my default was here. Let's take a look. Yeah, so I actually made an X1A. Basically, I left default settings. Or did I? And that's kind of what I'm going to get into. So this is an X1A it made. You'll notice it's pretty high res. And again, the PDF could have gone on in any kind of approval workflow I wanted to after this, you know, branch to another project, whatever I want to do from here. But we have that. And what I've been referring to, so, you know, there's ways to do default. You can, depending on the workflow, if I know I always want an X1A, I could just write that into that variable where it's always going to send X1A to the InDesign server and always make an X1A. But if I want to change that, you know, we're used to things like if I was going to upload this directly, doing an upload job ticket, right, where I could call what my preset was. Well, unfortunately, the plugin does not have a way to use a job ticket option. Okay, so it just uploads it and it uploads it, you know, just normal with whatever settings. You know, it's just an InDesign page going to the workflow and you can't do any job ticket variables. So what I did is I cheated a little bit and I was hoping I could actually do a custom panel. If someone knows how to do a custom panel in InDesign, let me know, because I found it for Photoshop, Illustrator, and Bridge, obviously, but I did not see in the latest versions where I can do a custom panel. But I just stole some metadata property, right? Headline I knew I wouldn't use. And if I come in here and say smallest file size, for instance, now, and I change that, again, I'm not saving, so it's going to automatically save. And so now, and not repository, let me update that. So now when I upload, it's going to come in here, it'll come in here as a revision. So I'm allowing revisions and to revise it, needs an approval. I'm going to go ahead and approve. My control panel keeps getting in the way. Oops, missed. There we go. And what I'm doing is basically just using that variable here and I'll try to blow that up somewhere. Yeah, let me use this. So basically, I'm just saying get metadata page order Photoshop headline, which is the variable it comes in as, and then set metadata context, to page order webinar preset result. So I'm overriding that preset basically by just doing that. It's a little bit of cheating, but it works. It's a way actually to use something. And obviously, especially if I had my own panel, I just didn't have time to really research it. I don't know if it's possible anymore in InDesign. But otherwise, you can use any of this information, or even if instructions, whatever, and put information that you would use as a job ticket to send out to ES, and modify your workflow. So let's see if it's still going. So you see, so that webinar one that gets created in jobs, that's actually the job name. And that was from that variable that I showed earlier. So while that's running, and I will show something a little bit different here. One of the things I had some customers bring up, from working remotely, is a lot of times they get packaged files, right? So, they had a customer work on InDesign page or pages. They create a package of that, so gives you the links, gives you the InDesign page itself. It makes a PDF of it or whatever, and I need my remote users to use that without having a VPN in and try to mount a Samba share over a VPN or remote control another machine. What they can actually do is, let's see, so I stored some of that here. Now put everything at the same level so I'll have easy access to get to everything. But here's a document that was packaged out of InDesign. This was created in InDesign with all local links. So it had nothing to do with ES. This is a user working that knows nothing about my ES. But my users need to modify this, place it in another file, whatever it is. It comes up and says the document contains links that are missing, right? Because it doesn't know where those are, doesn't know they exist in ES. It just knows, hey, I can't follow them on the same path. I haven't found out what this message actually is asking me. It's saying, do you want to download the missing HTTP links? I think if I had placed them there before, it would update. But since they're not linked from my ES, it doesn't know. So don't hit OK here. You just get a bunch of errors that show up at the bottom. I just cancel that. And you'll notice what it says here is it's got all these images missing. Since they're in the same folder, what I can actually do is here, where it says link non-HTTP assets, since it exists in that same folder, I can click on that and you'll see it says 4 assets linked. And there's my links. It actually has connection to them. If they're not downloaded currently, so they don't exist inside of here, but I don't really need them to. If I want to work with them, I can download them, but I don't have to. If I wanted to switch to low res or something like that, but it really doesn't matter whether I'm working low res, high res at this point, because they're not local. I'm not dealing with that. So I can come here once that's linked and go ahead and upload that to my project. You'll see this one created its other file. In the meantime, if I download that, that's how quickly that downloaded. Its smallest file size was a default for that. So you'll notice this was the X1A at 3.6 megs, smallest file size at 124K. There's my file. And if I come here and properties, nothing in the custom. So just by changing the metadata inside of the InDesign page, I was able to modify that. And that went. Did I go to the wrong place? Yeah, I did. I overwrote my page. So excuse me while I make the mistakes I warned y'all not to make and uploaded it to the wrong directory. So there's my page, came in, go ahead and do my approval. And you'll see it'll execute the script and download the same images as before and output them. So that easily I was able to link to files that were placed on my InDesign server. So that could have been placed just on a file system. You know, somebody gets a disk or gets an FTP and places them on the file system side. In this case, I worked from a project just to make it easy for the webinar to not have to move around too much. But was able to do that and work on that file very quickly from ES from the plugin and then create my high-res PDF of that page. So let's see, got a question. In the case of multiple Adobe servers, can all those variables be dynamically sent to Python step script in ES? I'm not sure. I haven't played with multiple because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, InDesign server, if you're running, you know, multiples, you basically run them on different ports. So I would imagine in ES you could script it so that you could switch between one and the other, or check on it. I mean, if you get complicated enough with the InDesign Server API, you could check load, maybe something like that. So there's probably ways to work with it. Just I hadn't dealt with it that much. Another question: does using the plugin impact my ES concurrent user license? And yes, if you are using the plugin, you should, and although I haven't noticed it on my system when I was playing with it yesterday, because I only show one login, but I'm actually logged in. I think the might be logged in as a web user, but let's see. I should have got that. No, I don't know. It should take one of your concurrent logins, but I'm not seeing that on my system currently, and that could be something Dalim changed. I know when I checked it before, it was. And the last thing, and this actually relates to one more question, you know, what happens with a multi-page PDF? You'll notice here, let's see, yeah, this guy here. So that was a multi-page PDF I sent in, and I got a multi-page PDF out with whatever settings. So in ES, I could obviously play with that and change it so that I could split the PDF when it came back in and do it, you know, place it in a flat plan or whatever you need to do from there. So no problem with that. Okay, so I think that's all the questions, and that's it. I'm not sure at the moment if we're going to be doing a September webinar, and you know, apologize for skipping some months here and there. We're trying to at least get them done every other month, but we've frankly been swamped, which is a good thing. We've been very busy working on different projects, and it's sometimes hard to get together to, you know, spend the time to put together a webinar. I had to kind of block some stuff out so I could do this one. So because of a trade show and a huge project we got going on right now, I'm not sure we'll be doing one in September, but we'll at least get one done in October. So again, usually scheduled for the third Wednesday, depending how the month goes. Obviously, you've noticed those get pushed back to the fourth Wednesday at times. But from that, that's all I have. Hope you guys have a great day, and thanks for your support. Appreciate it.